Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of The Guys Who Stare at Stats. Cade Kennedy with you alongside Tyler Riggs. And Tyler, what an amazing week 11 we had of the college football season. So many weird, wild games that happen. We always seem to get these late in the year, everyone trying to make that playoff push, and it is just a heck of a time to be following college football when we get into this part of the year. It's so much fun, and folks, we want you to be on the journey along with us, so feel free to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell to stay notified for when new videos come out, and as always, to leave a comment down below. We sincerely do appreciate that. It only takes a minute or two of your day. Just leave a comment, tell us, what you agree with, what you disagree with, who your champion of life of the week is, your fraud alert team, all those fun things. But Tyler, just what a week for the sport.
Yeah, and again, we harp on it every week, it seems like, but this race, for the college football playoff is just so fascinating. I've really enjoyed what it's done to the regular season so far because you get those big moments, you get some games that really do feel like elimination games, right? So it gives you those big time moments throughout the regular season.
Absolutely. And the first game to get into, Tyler, the massive story of the day, Ole Miss knocking down Georgia, and not just beating Georgia, but smacking them after the opening. First drive of the game, if you would have told me Jackson Dart is going to throw a pick, he is going to get injured and have to go to the locker room, I'd have said, wow, this game's over. Georgia's about to blow out Ole Miss. Oh, my goodness. Here we go. Ole Miss is about to be written off from playoff contention, possibly. And then the exact opposite happened. Ole Miss just manhandled Georgia the rest of the game. You could look at whatever stat you want to here. Ole Miss had over 100 more yards than Georgia, nearly about 150 more yards than Georgia did. Georgia had 3 turnovers. Ole Miss only had 1. It was a game where Ole Miss just did whatever they wanted to Georgia, it felt like, which is, again, kind of what we've touched on all year with the Dogs. Just an up and down, inconsistent team, as weird as that is to say.
Yeah, really in my notes, I had that Ole Miss's defense won the day here, right? You had Carson Beck under duress all day. He had 5 sacks. The turnovers are there. The run game for Georgia, non-existent. And part of this was the sacks, but he only had 59 yards on the ground. That's 1.8 per carry. Man, that was an absolute butt kicking by the Ole Miss defense. Offensively, despite some of the adversity that you mentioned with Jackson Dart, they did enough to not give the game away and put themselves over the top, capitalize on some of those opportunities. So for Ole Miss, all around great effort, I would say. For Lane Kiffin, you're really happy after this weekend.
Absolutely. Just what this does for Ole Miss. Finally beating yes, it says number 3 here, but they were an AP top 2 team, and having that kind of win, in your belt for Ole Miss, that goes a long way towards the playoff committee, should anything get, crazy there on later on in the season. But just a big win for the program itself that shows that, yes, Ole Miss is still continuing as a program on the rise here, and just, like you said, the defense wins the day for Ole Miss. This was an unbelievable performance by them. Carson Beck, no touchdown passes, had the 1 interception, 20 for 31. You already hit on it. When you're only putting up 1.8 yards per play on the ground, just going to be a rough day. Georgia could not do anything offensively. Outside of one drive in the third quarter where they got a field goal, just nothing going their way. And Ole Miss, even when Jackson Dart was out, Austin Simmons came in. Look at this, 5 for 6, 64 yards,
Yeah.
QBR of 99.7. Just came in, offense looked exactly the same, nothing changed. Having that depth there always helps. And Ole Miss, just a fantastic win for the Rebels.
And big for Lane Kiffin, man. That's a big resume builder for him right there. For a guy that's been told multiple times, you're a good coach, but you're not that guy to be able to get those big wins.
Absolutely. Taken away from this one, you look at Ole Miss, the everything is set up for you the rest of the season. If you can get your 2 wins, get to 10-2, you're going to be in the playoff at this rate. You've done everything you need to from once the month started so far. You can't go back and change things, obviously. But if you're Georgia, where do you go from here? Remember, they've got Tennessee coming up next week. That's their big home game Saturday night against Tennessee. Can Georgia find that consistency? I thought this might be able the game to do it. where, hey, if we can run the ball a little bit, start to try to poke some holes in that Ole Miss D-line. They've had moments where they've looked vulnerable. That did not happen, obviously. If you can get Carson Beck going, have a game where he can find somewhat of a rhythm, limit those turnovers, which he did. He only had the one interception, and it was late in the game. But still, he looked out of rhythm almost the entire day, and a lot of that was that Ole Miss front seven.
Yeah, it was for sure. And I think for Georgia, the point from here is if you're Kirby Smart, you tell your guys, hey, this is a big setback. But now your backs are against the wall. You mentioned that Tennessee game coming up. They've got to respond, and we'll find out what this team is really made of over these last couple of weeks of the regular season.
Absolutely, but just not a very good, no bad day or a nothing going day for Georgia. And then you look at what happened, though, in Atlanta. Georgia Tech, maybe one of the best days to be a Georgia Tech fan in recent memory. The Yellow Jackets, a 28-23 win over Miami. Just, once again, can't talk about it much. Cannot talk about it enough. Brent Key, I should say, what he's been able to do with Georgia Tech, just absolutely fantastic, continuing to build the program up. This was a game where Miami had their opportunities. I mean, it was another double-digit deficit where you felt like Miami had the ability to come back in this game. And you look at time of possession. Georgia Tech wins that nearly 35-25. Georgia Tech didn't have a turnover. Yes, Miami had more offense than they did, but Miami just time and time again had to go for it on fourth down or made that decision and just could not get it. Georgia Tech's defense would shut them down. It looked like Georgia Tech was going to maybe be in a bit of a bind. Miami scores with 6 minutes left. And you're thinking, oh boy, here we go again. Georgia Tech's going to punt the ball away. Miami's going to get down the field. And instead, it's a strip sack on Cam Ward that ends the game. Just wonderful for Georgia Tech.
Yeah, big time. And the thing with this game that I wonder is does this ruin Cam Ward's chances of a Heisman? He had statistically a pretty good game outside that strip sack, right? Where he's almost 350 yards, 3 touchdowns. So when you look at it just on paper, you think, well, he didn't have that bad of a game. But as you kind of detailed there, it's not like it was an easy day for Miami at all with that Georgia State defense and how they swarmed. So I'm curious to see what this does for the Cam Ward Heisman race. And also, boy, we want to talk about what a bye week, SMU. I mean, now they find themselves on top of the conference all by themselves at 5-0 in the conference with a couple games to go. They control their destiny to the Mustangs.
They do. And, you talked about the Cam Ward Heisman race. I think this is one of those that it kills it for him because you kind of needed Miami to stay undefeated to do that best quarterback on an undefeated team type of deal. I feel like with all the plays he has to make to even keep Miami in these games, if he doesn't, this is going to be the result. This is what's going to keep happening for them. Miami is just going to be in a big old bind. That's what they are. We've seen it every single conference game with the exception of Florida State, where Miami has to rely on Cam Ward to bail them out. And if it doesn't happen, this is going to be your result. Georgia Tech played phenomenal. 271 on the ground for Georgia Tech. This is a Miami team that does not even give up 100 rushing yards a game, and Georgia Tech just absolutely buried them when it comes to that. Look at Haynes King, 20 carries, 93 yards. Jamal Haynes, 3 carries, 83 yards and a touchdown. Haynes King, he did not have a great passing game in terms of yardage, but he's 6 for 6. That's all he's needed to do out there. You look at Aaron Philo, the freshman quarterback, comes in 5 for 10, 67 yards, has his TD. Georgia Tech, whatever they wanted to do on Miami, they were able to get it done.
Yeah, they were. And, just as you mentioned, huge program building win. So you feel good in that sense for Georgia Tech and a team that now, when they get a crack at Georgia here in a little bit, Georgia better be watching out because this Georgia Tech team, while being inconsistent, has won these big games so far in the season.
Absolutely. This is a Georgia Tech team that, keep in mind, a lot of injuries in this game. I mean, these two teams just beat each other up throughout the course of it. So hopefully, yeah, it was a physical game. Hopefully everyone can recover from that. But Tyler, we've got to go back to the SEC because the game of the day in terms of the ultimate shocker, I think, not because of the result, but because of how it happened. Bama goes into Death Valley with all the hype around, this is a playoff elimination game. Whoever loses gets loss number 3. And Alabama just absolutely decks LSU 42-13. Was not even close once we got to the third quarter.
Yeah, the magic of Death Valley at night died pretty hard in this one. And Cade, what cracks me up is watching back from last week in our preview. You laid out every reason why Bama should go in there and take the win, and you picked against them, man. You
I
still
did.
picked against
Because
them.
Brian
You
Kelly.
put out the blueprint.
Yeah, Brian Kelly, to be fair to his credit, until this week, was undefeated at night in Death Valley.
Oh, yeah.
This is a game where, even though we've harped on Brian Kelly how many times, in videos like this, but at the end of the day, this came down to LSU. I thought they'd be able to make the correction of, they'd take some things away from the A&M game, and instead they doubled down on it. Hey, Alabama has, not just any mobile quarterback, the dual threat quarterback in college football in Jalen Milroe. And what does he do? 12 carries, 185, 4 TDs. It might as well have been video game numbers for him. Only had 109 through the air. That's because, it was a rainy day. But LSU just could not stop the run. Alabama leaned on it. 311 on the ground and 6 rushing TDs. I mean, it was just an absolute blitzing of LSU. Nussmeier did not play great. Had the 2 interceptions. Caden Durham, 63 yards. It was playing well. But when you get in that big of a hole, you're going to have to start throwing the ball. So Alabama, their game plan worked. If you just pound LSU enough, they folded.
Yeah, this was the Jalen Milroe too for Alabama that, man, you've been wanting for a minute. Just getting it done on the ground was explosive. Didn't really do much in the passing game, but obviously didn't need to. Made the right decisions. And Alabama, 6.5 yards per carry, 311 yards, 6 touchdowns. My goodness, just running roughshod over the Tigers' defense.
It was just, if you're Alabama, if you would have told me LSU of all games would be a get-right game for them, I wouldn't have believed it. That's not a game that typically in Death Valley goes like that. That's usually, your best against their best. It's going to be a defensive, hard-fought, physical game. And Alabama just obliterated LSU. There's no other way to say it. 42-13, and it wasn't even that close. Alabama, though, they are set up in the position now that you still want to be in. You've got Mercer, you've got a badly wounded Oklahoma, and then you've got Auburn, who is terrible. You've got 3 easy wins in front of you. Auburn Bowl or Auburn Iron Bowl mainly because that's in Tuscaloosa, but you've got 3 games in front of you that you should absolutely dominate in. The playoffs are easily in Alabama's grasp, but for LSU, it's the opposite, where you've got to get a miracle now to get it back into this thing, if you even can. And I don't know, losing the way they did, if the committee would even let them back in.
Yeah, we talked about last week that we felt this was, for all intents and purposes, an elimination game when it came to the playoffs, right? And that's why I picked Alabama at the end of the day, because when their backs have been against the wall these last couple of years in those moments, Nick Saban or no Nick Saban, they get it done. And they did again this week. So they now get to control their destiny a bit with that schedule that you mentioned. And yeah, LSU's they've got to hope for absolute and utter complete chaos just to get a glimpse back into the playoff.
Absolutely. I do want to say, though, that once again, the strategy of picking SEC underdog at home, what is going on here? Some weeks it works and some weeks it's either an all or nothing, Tyler. I don't understand it. What are we doing here?
You just got to read the tea leaves like I do.
Okay.
Yeah, I've if we go back, I think I've got a pretty good track record this season of deciphering those out.
Okay.
I don't know how, I don't know why, but you just got to be able to read those tea leaves a little bit better, my guy.
Yeah. Either way, let's go to a game that we both knew would be competitive, would be not violent per se, but would be a physical game, would be a very emotional game. BYU and Utah, back in Salt Lake City. The Holy War did not disappoint. 22-21, BYU wins on what some would say is a controversial defensive holding. I can't honestly say if it was or wasn't, because ESPN showed the worst camera angle possible of it. Shout out to ESPN for that one. But BYU pulling together a just miracle drive at the end, marching 65 yards, going from their own 9-yard line to get in field goal range. BYU coming back from double digits to beat Utah. BYU 9-0, Utah had 3 turnovers in this game, and everything looked so well for Utah in the second quarter. They brought in Brandon Rose at quarterback. I thought he played well in the game for the most part, but just when push comes to shove, can Utah's offense get anything going? And if they can't, it's going to be a rough day for them. It's what ended up happening in the second half. BYU pounced on it, and the Cougs still all alone at the top of the Big 12.
Yeah, and this was an old school rock fight, Cade. I think one where you could tell there's a lot of animosity between these teams. I mean, you get coaches fired up in a way you hadn't seen them in a minute. And BYU, for most of the game, they were anemic offensively. Utah was doing exactly what they needed to do, control the game. Nothing crazy, but doing just enough. And BYU, it kind of, although the game was a little bit more explosive, it reminded me of that win over Oklahoma State in Provo, where at the end of the day, they come up clutch. They find a way to get it done. That's been part of their story this season. It's not always pretty, it's not always clean, but BYU has prevailed.
Absolutely. It's one of those where it's almost like Miami, though. Kind of that same thing, Tyler, where you don't know how they're going to win, but you keep watching because they're going to find a way to win at some point. And I mean, it was, the fallout from this is going to be interesting. Utah's athletic director said we absolutely got robbed of this game, which, people have rightfully pointed out there was the phantom face mask earlier on in the game.
Yeah, it went both ways on the call, so I don't think any one team could claim they got robbed because that phantom face mask on BYU is pretty big too. So it kind of went back and forth in that sense. At least the officials, although they weren't great, they called it bad both ways, right? That's sometimes all you can ask.
But I'm just more mad at the Big 12 that you let Kevin Marr, who might be the most incompetent reffing crew in the Big 12, get this game that you knew was going to be crazy like this. Why would you let his crew, who might be the worst in all of college football, at least at the Power 4 level, why would you let them have this game? What are you doing, Brett Yormark? We need to talk about this. But other than that, BYU just, what else can you say about them? A team that keeps finding ways to win for Utah. You hate to lose it, but at the same time, if you can't move down the field, if you can't get in scoring position, your defense can only hold for so long.
Yeah, for sure. And that's what it came down to. It's tough for Utah. It's been that type of season to lose a game like this, big rivalry. You have it most of the way, but I mean, we're kind of going through it with the OU side. We'll talk about that later, but sometimes it's just not your year in that sense.
Absolutely. But to move on to the next game, we do have another fun story to talk about. Tyler, Indiana is 10-0. First 10-win season in program history, and to be 10-0 doing it, and to get it done over Michigan, who is just struggling in their own right as well. Michigan now 5-5. If Michigan somehow loses another game before Ohio State, we could be talking about the Wolverines not going bowling. That's a whole video in and of itself. But my goodness, a game where you want to talk about rock fight. Indiana, the better team with yardage and only 246. I mean, this was classic Big Ten football for a while.
It was, and I think for Indiana here, people are going to look at this and say, how could you be that close against Michigan? But we touched on it last week. This Michigan defense is legit. They just don't have an offense to go with it, right? And to that credit for Indiana, they did control the first half. You're leading 17-3 at the break. And you could tell in the second half, it was more of a focus of, okay, let's make sure we don't get too crazy, and try to get too cute with it. And they were able to do what they needed to do to close the game. We've seen that with Tennessee, right? Where people go, okay, why are you so conservative? Well, sometimes it's better to do that and make sure you guarantee yourself that win than try to go crazy and make a statement. The other thing for this too, and just Kerr's work was taking some sacks, really drug down that Russian attack. They couldn't get anything going. 4 sacks for Michigan. He dealt with that adversity as well as you could ask. Maybe not the cleanest game, but a good enough game to get it done. So for Indiana now, you set yourself up with that big opportunity to go on the road into the horseshoe in a couple weeks and try to take down Ohio State. That was the main goal of this. No matter how you won, it was the fact that you won and you were able to set up that big opportunity.
Absolutely. And, and I want to give a shout out to Indiana's crowd for this game, too. I mean, every shot you saw of that place was electric the entire game. Even though, when you get a game like this, it can be boring for a crowd where it's just back and forth, punt, 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 punt. They can you can get taken out of a game like that. We've seen it happen before, multiple times. But Indiana's crowd just stayed consistent. They stayed loud. They stayed rowdy. They were a force in this game. And I want to give, credit to them for that. But an Indiana team that, when neither side can average more than 2 yards in the ground game, for Indiana to have that defensive front, to be able to go toe-to-toe with Michigan just in general, shows where Indiana can be as a program under Kurt Cignetti. We've talked about this every single week. They're going to be fun for the near future. They've got that bye week, and then Ohio State, exactly like you said, Tyler. This is an Indiana team that, unless something ridiculous happens, will be in the playoff.
Yeah, and we'll see how the committee reacts should they lose to Ohio State. But I'd say they've probably done enough to deserve that spot or argue for it. And I think the other big takeaway from this game is that Coach Cignetti's group showed, hey, we could get down to mud with people, And for a Big Ten team, that is needed as far as your makeup, right? You need to be able to show that you could win some of those dogfights. So credit to them for being able to do that and make that statement.
Absolutely. Well, Tyler, we almost lived in a different world. Denver had a game-winning field goal blocked, so Kansas City will stay undefeated. That kind of caught my eye. That's why I don't have as much to say about it. And then Tampa Bay just kicked a field goal to tie it up with San Francisco. There's your NFL update for people watching this 3 hours to 5 hours later about games that are happening now while we're recording this. But Tyler, the next game to get to, one of your big games of the week, Colorado coming into Lubbock, getting the full Lubbock experience, tortillas everywhere. Texas Tech's up 13-0. Travis Hunter signed a tortilla at the end of the game. Just unbelievable. You got to love it. But Colorado coming into a hostile environment. If you've ever been to Lubbock, if you've ever seen a game in Lubbock, you know how crazy that place could get. But Texas Tech, 3 turnovers in this one, had multiple opportunities, just did not have it in them. And Shiloh Sanders capping the game off with the 6-yard fumble recovery that I think confused a lot of fans. They didn't think it was a fumble, but it was. And at the end of the day,
players didn't think it was a fumble.
Yeah. At the end of the day, the Buffs once again getting the job done, and we inch closer and closer to BYU and Colorado maybe throwing down for the Big 12 title.
They might be, Cade, for sure. And that's you got to give Colorado a lot of credit because, like you mentioned, that hostile environment. Not only that, you come out down a couple of scores in that first quarter, and what do you do from there, right? You absolutely respond. I think for me, as I watched this game and kind of took some thoughts on it, Shadur Sanders in this one continues to prove why he may be the top quarterback in this class, right? Unfazed by that pressure. Things weren't going great early. What does he do? He comes out, finishes the game with 3 touchdown passes, including the big clincher to Travis Hunter, essentially. And, had a day that where the run game's not going, doesn't matter. Shadur able to get 4 total scores, 3 on the through the air, 1 on the ground. Travis Hunter continues to put himself in that Heisman conversation, rightfully so. He has a great day as far as receiving goes. And then defensively, he's not going to show up in the stat sheet for this one, but there's a reason why Texas Tech didn't want to miss with that man on the other side of the ball. So, and credit to the Colorado defense for tightening up after that first quarter as well.
Absolutely. I mean, once that first quarter happened, I kind of felt like, okay, this is going to be that typical example of what I call getting Lubbocked, where you go out there and you enter a different universe when you play in that stadium as a ranked team on the road there. We're just, sorry, it doesn't matter how good you actually are. Texas Tech is going to dictate the game. It does not matter if you're the number 1 team in the country or number 25. You were playing by Texas Tech's rules out there. And credit to Colorado, they were able to shake that off after the first quarter. You don't see that a whole lot from good teams out there, but they were able to do that. They were able to control the game, really just change it to where they had complete domination of it. Texas Tech eventually kind of made it competitive at the end, had opportunities, got stuffed on a big 4th and goal late, still scored, made it a 1-possession game, and then, like I said earlier, Shiloh putting the thing away. Colorado continues to impress me. I did not think they would be where they are right now, but all I could say is, tip the hat to them. They're going to keep winning.
Yeah, and for all the, the Dion Daggers, if you will, this was a big statement for him. You want to talk about a guy who, in a situation where your team's facing adversity early, not surprised that, similar to Dion, the team responded by saying, hey, we're just going to keep doing what we do. and that provided to be big for Colorado in this one.
Yeah, a massive win there for Colorado. But Tyler, it is now time to get to Champions of Life of the Week. One of my favorite segments we get to do on this show where we highlight someone who had a massive win. And for me, it's pretty obvious. It's going to be Ole Miss. Anytime you get a win of this caliber, it's going to be fun. Shout out to, the crowd was fun in this one. Had a record crowd at Ole Miss for this. Got to storm the field multiple times, which don't do that, please. It's just going to make things worse. Even though you'd already put the game away, Lane Kiffin looked like he was ready to say some words to some of those students, but they had to give the post-game interview anyway. But Ole Miss just, can't talk about enough. Fantastic win for them. Anytime you shut down a great team like Georgia, it's just going to be, offensive line played well. Defensive line just coming in and crushing them, putting Carson Beck under pressure all day. He could never get comfortable. A lot of the stuff we've already talked about a little bit. Jackson Dart didn't have an amazing game. He didn't need to have an amazing game. Ole Miss was able to do enough just combined as a unit. This was just, this is going to be one of those head scratches we talk about for a while where how did Ole Miss, not only win this game, a game they weren't favored to win, but to do it by 18?
Yeah, and I think it's more of a referendum on what we talked about with Georgia coming in this game. It's a team that overall comes down to Carson Beck. Could you trust him to go win you games? And again, the answer this week was no. That Ole Miss defense just dominated, absolutely. So yeah, a huge win for Ole Miss. Big program builder for them. We touched on that. Kudos to them, and now maybe looking dangerous, should I say, for the playoffs.
Absolutely. But Tyler, who do you have as your champion of life of the week?
We got champions of life. We got one real person and some other things. So the person I'm going with, not a team, but player Dylan Gabriel.
Yeah.
He's now the all-time FBS touchdown leader. They got that win over Maryland, pulled away late. Gabriel continues to be really solid. Didn't do anything particularly flashy in this game when you look at the stat sheet, but taking over as the all-time touchdown leader. It's a credit to how consistent he's been over the course of his career, despite fighting through some injuries, things of that nature. Some teams, you think back to that 6-6 OU team. He was a guy that, despite that team, was at least consistent throughout the season, providing some spark. And so kudos to him on that. Champion of life for me this week. And by God, America's team with America's drive. Army going on a 21 play, 94 yard, just under 14-minute drive in the second half to effectively finally take control of that game against North Texas. Army remains undefeated. We'll see where they wind up as far as the ranking this week. But yeah, that's football, Cade. That's real football right there. That sheds a tear for all the sickos out there.
Absolutely. When you're able to have a drive that is over 14 minutes long and just casually just cruise up the length of an entire quarter, that's what we call real football. That's what everyone in theory wants. A drive where you just, this entire quarter, you're not getting the ball. We're going to go score. Deal with it. You don't get to see that often, but when you do, it is absolutely beautiful.
To me, there's no better statement of, hey, we're going to come out here and kick butt than establishing will like that on a 20-yard drive. People think, oh, you just go score at will on a team. That's kicking their butt. No. Kicking their butt is going up and down the field saying, you know what? We're going to come at you, get 5 yards a pop, and you're going to have to deal with it because you're not getting off this field for a minute.
Absolutely. And then, you're still there?
Yes.
Okay, good. I was going to say, I don't know if you cut out or not. It kind of fizzled
that was
at
my
the end.
point. No, this is my final point. That's all I got to say on that.
Okay, and then the other one we got to get to, of course, Indiana. Big win for Indiana. Get to be a champion of life of the week for the 10-0 start there. First 10-win season in program history. It doesn't matter how you do it, but getting the job done, absolutely, just the magical season continues for the Hoosiers.
It does. Monty Mill, we can't talk enough about Kurt Cignetti, what he's been able to do. And that's a guy that has absolutely put himself in a spot where, if you're LSU and the season doesn't finish great, you go throw a lot of money at Kurt Cignetti. This guy's put himself as the name in coaching right now. Kudos to what he's been able to do. As he's told kids, hey, just Google me. I win.
That's what he does, Tyler. That is all he does is win. And to think that it's an Indiana team that, was terrible last year. That, you add some kids from James Madison. I don't think anyone expected this. People thought Indiana might have a better season. You could even go back to our Big Ten preview if you wanted to see us be absolutely wrong about Indiana. But at the same time, just nobody expected what the Hoosiers are doing. And it's just an incredible scene to watch. Like I talked about with the crowd there, seeing everyone energized and excited for Indiana football. People who've been waiting their entire life for a season like this. Down to college kids, they might be a freshman. They're just getting into the sport, getting to experience this ride along. Just everybody all in on Indiana. They are one of America's teams as well, I would argue. Unless you're a Purdue
Definitely
fan.
so. Unless you're a Purdue fan. Otherwise, if you hate the Hoosiers, I don't know about you. I don't know if I trust you as a person.
But then, Tyler, we've got to get to fraud alert. And I mean, this is just absolutely. I'm going to switch things up. I'm going to go in order of least fraud to most fraud here because I want to talk about.
We got a lot this week. I think fairly.
We got a lot. We got to talk about Iowa State first because they are just. I mean, I still think they're a contender in the Big 12 race. They still are in play here, but at the same time, getting absolutely beat around by Kansas, 45-36, a Kansas team that. You look at it, you go, they're 2-6, now they're 3-6, but they've had a lead in every game in the fourth quarter. The ability was there for Kansas to put up a big performance, but just the way Iowa State looked in this thing was just ugly. Kansas receivers were getting wide open. Jalen Daniels looked like himself again. Kansas had 532 yards of offense against the Iowa State defense that had been solid for the most part this year.
Yeah, I think that's the most shocking thing we look at, right? Is just if you would have told an Iowa State fan going into this game, hey, you're going to go put 36 points on Kansas, they're going, oh, we've got this easy. If I would have told Rocco Beck is going to throw for nearly 400 yards and 3 touchdowns, they say you're lying. It sounds like a dream. And all that happened, and it didn't matter. Kansas just up and down the field on them. The run game was there. Jalen Daniels, like you mentioned, was making big plays. Iowa State just was paper on that defense. They were getting torn up, man. It was bad.
I mean, and you look at Kansas's 2 big touchdown passes from Daniels. They were both chunk plays, 62-yard bomb, 70-yard bomb. I mean, it was just ridiculous. Where Kansas just was able to find guys open that they hadn't been able to find open all year. Devin Neal, 116 on the ground and 2 touchdowns. Kansas, whatever they wanted to do in this game, they were able to do, which for Iowa State is just completely inexcusable. Jalen Noel, he tried 8 catches, 167, 2 touchdowns. He was able to be a spark for Iowa State today offensively to kind of help try to turn this into a shootout. And when it finally looked like Iowa State, the dust was starting to settle. They had a potential, the ability to come back, only down 38-28. They throw a pick 6. And it just completely, the game is over. There's 6 minutes left. You're not beating Kansas.
Yeah, it was shocking. I mean, utterly shocking. And now Kansas State fans are Iowa State fans are looking around going, well, is that it? That just cost us our chance, at making a splash and trying to be in the playoff this year. And it very well might. We'll have to see how it turns out for the Big 12.
Yeah, and for Kansas State fans, though, they are rubbing their hands together thinking, hey, we're still in this thing. We've got an opportunity to bounce back now. Big 12 race getting more and more open by the day with Iowa State now 2 straight losses to teams they should have beaten. But, Tyler, the other game to get to on Fraud Alert, it's Miami. This has been a long time coming.
You've been waiting.
I've been waiting for this for a long time. Ever since the Virginia Tech game, I've been waiting to talk about this Miami team because I've said how many times on this show that this is just that same 2017 Miami team. It's that same 2017 feel I got from them where they're going to keep dodging bullet after bullet after bullet. Someone is finally going to be the team to take them down. And I mean, it was almost to a T the same scenario that Pitt was able to beat them in a few years, or when that team lost a game. It was an 11 a.m., kind of a sleepy environment. A lot of Miami fans at Bobby Dodd. Now, that quickly changed. Bobby Dodd can get, up for big games. That's what happened here. But Georgia Tech scoring early. Miami responded right back. I thought, okay, this is going to be your typical shootout game. I'm not going to be too surprised with what's going on here. But then after that, I mean, Miami takes the lead. Georgia Tech goes on a 10-minute, nearly 11-minute drive, 10-minute, 45-second drive, just keeps chewing up time and just keeps sitting on the ball, playing that Georgia Tech style of football we all associate them with, just eating up that clock. And Miami didn't have an answer for it. They haven't had an answer for a lot of things on defense this year, to be fair. But it's just, I don't think anyone wanted Cam Ward to win the Heisman more than Miami's defense. There's a reason for that. This defense is not good. They are still soft. They get physical. They get emotional. They get handsy out there. They commit several stupid personal fouls. I mean, you saw it late in the game. The fouls that should have been, or fouls that got called where Miami's just straight up headhunting, it felt like at times.
Yeah.
It's just, this is who Miami is. This is who they've always been. If you can beat them now, we've got to see what Miami does next week. Because my goodness, now that everyone can finally stop talking about Miami like they're actually going to do anything, I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled. We finally have to stop acting like Miami is a top 5 team. Because everyone could, with an eyeball, you don't even need 2, you just need 1. You could tell that they're not that quality of a team.
Some venom for the Hurricanes. But yeah,
I don't like
it was. You laid it out. I mean, felt like it was coming, right? It felt like it was on its edge. You go, surely they can't keep doing this. They can't keep getting away with it. And finally, they were punished properly.
They were. So Tyler, I mean, I know we talked about this a little bit. Fraud alert kind of going to be similar, I feel like, where there's several individuals that can definitely be put on there, though.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I got a couple offenders this week. You covered the teams. I got the individuals. First, Brian Kelly. Oh my gosh, talk about dancing on a grave. Oh, that one felt good. 13-0 at night at Death Valley. What gets in gets stomped by Alabama in the mud. I mean, the Crimson Tide just ran all over him, and you would think, hey, we might want to make sure we could cover a running quarterback this week since they weren't able to do it against Texas A&M. Oh, it was worse. It was worse. Bimmerell was nearly 200 yards on the ground. Oh, and now if you're an LSU fan, you go, okay, this guy's a good coach, but is he really good enough to be paid all that he's paid? So yeah, give me Brian Kelly. Huge fraud. Never been a fan. Never been a fan.
Never been a fan.
And here we are. Yeah, day one not supporter of Brian Kelly. And then my other one, and we'll touch on this a little bit more in Best of the Rest, but Jackson Arnold. Oh my gosh. The fumbles. It was all I could think of. I don't know if you've seen the new State Farm commercial with Andy Reid doing the fumble rooski. That's all I could think of. It's just Andy Reid just saying that over and over again because it was bad. And, there was a play in the game. It goes back to, earlier in the season where Arnold throws that horrible pick into triple coverage. Right? Yeah. Had kind of a similar moment where the OU's driving, they need a score, and he goes to pull down the ball early and try to run, and they highlight how he just misses Deion Burks breaking open late, which would have been most likely a very easy touchdown. And it's those little things that for a guy that's supposed to be a 5-star talent, that has the NIL backing that he does, that has, by all intents and purposes, been deemed as the future for OU football, we still aren't seeing improvements, Cade.
Absolutely.
Still the same old.
I mean, the other thing that was crazy to me, Tyler, and even the commentators pointed out on the broadcast, where just he's seeing ghosts out there, where and some of that's offensive line, but some of that's just he's so used to expecting pressure that he panics even when he has a clean pocket, where it's just I don't know how you can fix that.
Well, and that's the big thing. Like, people don't understand, and me and you have talked about this off air a lot, where there's a lot of quarterbacks at the college and college and pro level that have phenomenal talents that are undeniable. But if you do not properly develop them, properly put them in the right places to succeed, you can't expect a guy, no matter how talented. I mean, look at Patrick Mahomes, okay, at Texas Tech. His talent was undeniable. But pretty much his entire career at Tech, he just didn't have the full team around him. He had some pieces around him, and he would do some great things here and there. But it was clear that that team around him did not match his talent, right? And that's where people then, as he gets to the pros, and you see Andy Reid take him under his wing, and they get a good team around him, you see his true talent. You go, oh my God, how did everybody miss on this guy, right? Yeah, he was still a high first round pick, but he wasn't number one like he probably should have been. And Arnold, I think, ultimately falls into the category of a Sam Darnold, of a Josh Allen, to a degree where the talent is there. Because Sam Darnold, you remember at USC, was very hyped up. And we go look at his
Yes.
film, you go, oh my God, he's got the size, he's got the arm, he's got a quick release. But what Sam Darnold struggled with, Cade, turnovers. His
Yeah.
decision making not very good. And that, for the most part, until this year, although today might be seeing some hauntings of that in the NFL. He threw 3 picks today. But, anyways, you could tell that decision making process really hurt him in the NFL because you cannot afford to be turning over the ball. Josh Allen has had a similar complaint. He's been good, right? But oftentimes his turnovers is what kind of costs the Bills at times in key moments. So I think ultimately Jackson Arnold falls into that category of amazing talent, but you either need to get somebody with him to get him to understand how to make better decisions and how to take care of that ball because it's got to be the most important thing for a quarterback.
Yes.
If you give me a quarterback that doesn't turn the ball over and has average skills otherwise, I'll take that over a guy that has amazing skills but cannot take care of that football.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just we'll talk about that more when we get to Oklahoma, Missouri, because I'll save my thoughts for that kind of. But it's just head scratching performance by Jackson Arnold once again, and then Brian Kelly. Just Brian Kelly. What else do you need to say there? I think you covered that one pretty well. But Tyler, it is finally time to get to power rankings. First for the Power Four, the top five here, and I think we'll be pretty similar. If you watched our CFP bracketology AP instant reaction, kind of went over some of this here. I've got Oregon number 1, Ohio State 2, Texas 3, Indiana 4, and then I've got BYU at 5. I feel like, they're not really getting punished for being moved down to 5. It's just one of those Indiana's 10-0. They had that gutsy win against Michigan. If those two played, I think it'd be a really good game. But BYU, I understand it's a rivalry. You should still not be giving up 21 points in a quarter to Utah under any circumstances. I am sorry. That should not be happening. Not with this Utah team down to a third string quarterback. But BYU still deserving to be in the top 5. They are undefeated.
This is where we vary a little bit. I go 1, 2, 3 as Oregon, Ohio State, Texas. I think we agreed on Indiana at 4. That BYU, I'm going to take Notre Dame at number 5. I know you say, well,
Okay.
technically they're not Power 5. You're right, but they'll get it. They still can get that large bid. Can't qualify for a bye, but can still get that large bid. Give me Notre Dame. I touched on a little bit in that AP reaction bracketology video. Yes, the loss to NIU is horrible, and it may be too much to overcome for them to truly be trusted, within the college football playoff committee to be too high of a seed. But Notre Dame has rolled. Like they have since that game, they have really turned it around. They're not doing anything flashy, but they're just taking care of business. I'm talking myself into the Fighting Irish at number 5 this week in my power rankings for CFP contenders.
Yeah, and see, I get the logic you're putting into that, but I think it's just, at least for me personally, that Northern Illinois loss is just so bad. It's
Oh,
it's
it's horrible.
it's
And
not
I
one
could
of those.
understand anybody that would say it's too much for me. I can't dig into that. I
Yeah,
I completely understand.
yeah. I would put Penn State over them. I'd put Tennessee over them. I'd put either of those two one-loss teams over Notre Dame because you can't lose that game and get away with it when Northern Illinois is not some 9 or 10 win or 11 win MAC team. If Northern
Yeah, it's
Illinois
not
was
like they're
super
dominating.
good,
Yeah,
if they were the
sure.
MAC champion, you still can't understand it because it's a blue blood team doing that. But you can kind of be like, okay, I get it to an extent. But when they're not good, when they turn around and get smacked by Buffalo 2 weeks later and all that, oh, hey, ranked Northern Illinois, look at all this hype. That's gone. No one's talked about Northern Illinois since September.
So,
They're not a
and
story
they're
anymore.
honestly might not even finish in the top half of the match.
Yeah,
So
I would say that
yeah, it's
just
it's a pretty damning loss for Notre Dame. Don't get me wrong, but again, when you look at how they played in recent weeks, and you mentioned the Tennessees, the Penn States, and we talked about it in the AP recap, where it's really a toss up. Once you
it
get
is.
past 5. and even past 3 to the degree of who you put there. And I just feel like Notre Dame, at least in recent weeks, especially, has shown they might be the most complete team of that bunch. They're getting it done through the air, on the ground, defensively, special teams. So, like Tennessee and Penn State have their known flaws and weaknesses, where Notre Dame, I'm just not seeing it as much. And you could change a lot from week 2 to now. I mean, look at Oregon, right? We're talking about a team that struggled with Idaho to start the season, narrowly
Absolutely.
lost to Boise, and now everybody's kind of like, oh yeah, Oregon by far and away the number 1 team in the country.
Absolutely. It'll be one of those. If Notre Dame gets that next big game, we would see, but they don't really have a big game left on the schedule.
They got Army. They
Yeah,
got Army.
they've got Army, but the Army's not a big game in the eyes of the College Football Playoff Committee for whatever reason. I'm just saying, I don't get it. But hey, to them, it's apparently not a big game. To us, it'll be a big game we'll talk about in a few weeks, but not to them. But that actually goes right straight into the top 3 group of 5 teams because, Tyler, I don't think this is going to change for either one of us. We are set in our ways here. Boise State, number 1, Ashton Genty. Need I say more? I really don't need to say any more about Boise State there. Army, I've still got at my number 2. They're still undefeated, 9-0 for the first time since 1996. They're trying to get to that 10-0 start. They've never done it. Last 3 times they were 9-0. If you think about those 40 teams, they were national champions being 9-0. That last Army team that was 9-0 lost the next game. So can they get to that 10-0 start? We'll have to see. It'll be a tall task in a few weeks when they play Notre Dame. Bryson Daly, 21 rushing touchdowns, 7 passing TDs, still amazing. Army, top 10 in offensive efficiency in terms of all FBS teams. Number 9 in the country there. 334 yards per game on the ground for Army. That is still number 1 in America in rushing offense. And Army, the number 1 scoring defense in America, only giving up 10.3 points per game. Had another impressive showing, the 14-3 win over North Texas. A game where North Texas threatened, but had a turnover on downs, on 4th and goal, inside the 3, and then threw an interception in the end zone when they were 5 yards away again. Army's defense stood up clutch both times there. And then for number 3, I've got Tulane still. Number 19 in total efficiency. Darian Mensah continuing to play great. Tulane finally ranked in at least the AP poll this week. We'll see how that goes for the College Football Playoff rankings when those come out. And Mekhi Hughes, over 1,200 yards on the ground this season, 13 rushing TDs. He's playing pretty darn well as well.
Yeah, that's fair. And you said dug in your ways. I go, of course, with Boise State Army. And then give me Louisiana. The Raging Cajuns just dismantled Arkansas State this week. Sorry to Tulane, you probably deserve it. But you know what?
You're going to put Louisiana in there.
Give me Louisiana, fighting for the little man there. Rank the Cajuns, don't be afraid, playoff committee.
There you go. We'll see, though. Louisiana got some votes in the AP poll this week. Maybe that you can get that conversation going there. But looking at the Heisman top 3, Tyler, again, I've finally narrowed it down to 3. Last few weeks I've been saying 4, that if and of Travis Hunter and Cam Ward. That is not happening anymore. Cam Ward is out of the Heisman race. I've still got Ashton Genty at 1. That's not going to change unless something drastic happens. He looked like himself again. 34 carries for 209, 3 touchdowns. Looked great once again. Dylan Gabriel's still at 2. 23 for 34. 183 only through the air, but did have 3 touchdowns that balances it out against a interesting Maryland team. And then Travis Hunter, 9 catches, 99 yards and a touchdown. No defensive stats because Texas Tech didn't want to be on the same side of the field as him.
Yeah, and I like those. The only flip I would have is I'm putting Travis Hunter too. I feel like he's probably got a little bit more. We talked about in the past where it's more of a narrative award, right? At the end of the day, Genty's got a strong narrative. I think Travis Hunter does. Dylan Gabriel should be in the conversation. He's my number 3. His problem is he's just not doing it in an explosive fashion.
Yeah.
He's just kind of the best player on the best team, which may be good enough at the end of the year. We'll see how the Heisman voters go. But I go Genty, Hunter, Gabriel as my 1, 2, 3.
There you go. So, Tyler, that brings us to the best of the rest, the other 3 games that not a whole lot of people talked about. And we got to start with Boise State because, yes, Ashton Genty, he had a great game. 34 carries, 209, 3 touchdowns, like I just said. But Boise State did not look good as a complete unit in this game. This was a 14-14 game at halftime. It was the primetime game on Fox that not many people were keeping an eye on, but my goodness, this turned into a fight for a while, but Boise tried to pull away again. Nevada scored late to make it 28-21, had an opportunity, of course, to come back if you could get an onside kick. None of that happened, and Boise held on to dear life to beat a 3-win Nevada team that just, you don't think this should be happening, but you look at the box score and you start to understand it a little bit. Maddox Madsen, not a great game for him. 9 for 20, 119, one touchdown, but an interception. Boise only had three, not even receivers. Two receivers and Ashton Genty were the only guys who caught passes for the Broncos.
Yeah, it was definitely an odd game, and we talked about Madsen before where he's not going to have to do a lot considering how good and how much of a threat Ashton Genty is. But he's got to be a little bit better than this, right? If you want a legit chance to be a contender for Boise State, he cannot afford to have a bad game because there's going to be teams you're going to get your best shots, right, from these teams down the stretch. So he's got to be a little bit better. Defensively, they're not bad, but haven't been necessarily great at the same time. They've had their moments. And I'd say, look, despite all that, it's still a Boise State team that's only lost is to Oregon by 3. I think they're allowed with the rest of the house. Some of these teams have turned out, especially Big 12, ACC, SEC, to have a questionable game here and there. Now you just want to see Boise State respond and start to play peak football towards the end of the season.
Absolutely. And I mean, the only knock on Boise they're going to get is this is a game everyone expected them to blow out a terrible team, and it just did not happen. And like I said, some of that's more everyone but Ashton Genty on offense. No one could really get in the rhythm. It was just give him the ball. He played great. But other than that, just a weird game for Boise, but you still got the job done. And at the end of the day, like you said, that's the only thing that matters right now. You're in the driver's seat for that 12 spot.
You are, and I'm curious to see how the committee reacts to, this game if they kind of go along with the fact that, okay, well, we can't really move them up, but they're still in the driver's seat. They at least got the win. I'm curious to see what happens Tuesday night on that.
Absolutely. But the next game to get on to, one that I think a lot of people, again, are not going to be talking about, but this also happened, another weird late night game. It's Virginia getting the upset over a top 20 Pitt team, 24-19. This is a game where Pitt started to try to pile on in the third or the second quarter, but could only get field goals. Had to settle for field goals twice. You look at their 2 drives in the final 3 minutes or the second quarter, had 11 plays for 22 yards and kicked a 44-yarder and a 48-yarder. Had those opportunities, could only settle for 3. Virginia comes right back, gets 2 touchdowns in the third quarter. Pitt responded, couldn't get the 2 though, and Virginia just grinding the game away, get the field goal, play solid defense. Each team had 2 turnovers. You look at time of possession, Pitt got buried in that 35-24, 35-25 if you round out the seconds correctly. But for Pitt, I mean, to think of 2 weeks ago, we're talking about them as a possible ACC contender. And other than that, it just looked terrible. Eli Holstein just not a whole lot going there. 10 for 23, 121. Nate Yarnell was brought in. 4 for 12, 44 yards, a touchdown, but 2 picks. Pitt's offense is just completely disintegrated, Tyler. And Virginia was able to take advantage of that, just get a few scores of their own, and that was all they needed to do in this one.
Yeah, very disappointed if you're Pitt, right? We could easily throw them in frauds of the week, but I think the writing was kind of on the wall for them. It was already iffy. It was one of those teams that people would talk about and say, okay, as soon as they lose, we'll know they're frauds. And unfortunately, now you've dropped a couple and pretty much put yourself in the rear view as far as the ACC title picture, unless they just get really crazy in the coming weeks.
Absolutely. And I mean, just a gut punch for Pitt again, especially coming off the SMU loss where you got smacked around and we're starting to realize that, like you said, Pitt's not the team we thought they were. They're not even deserving a fraud alert because I think everyone after that SMU game started to expect this. But just the gut punch for Pitt to knock them out of any type of conversation. And Tyler, it's time to get to the last game to talk about. And a game that I really did not want to talk about this week because it's Missouri and Oklahoma. a game that
Yeah.
feels right to be playing again. I mean, even Missouri fans agreed that this is probably the closest they felt to a rivalry game since they joined the SEC, where this is a Big 8 game. There's a lot of history here. But Oklahoma had opportunities in this game. Zach Schmidt hit a 56-yard field goal. I didn't know he was capable of doing that personally, but
I don't think he knew he was capable of that, honestly.
either way, I mean, just look at the win probability chart here, and that's really the tell of the game for you here. Where Oklahoma, I mean, my goodness, a 93.7% chance to win with 127 to go. Drew Pine gets sacked. Oklahoma just had a scoop and score from Billy Bowman. It's 23-16. All Oklahoma has to do is not give up a score, just make one final stop, and they could not do it. To Missouri's credit, Theo Weiss played fantastic, had some big plays there. You know he wanted some revenge against Oklahoma. Luther Burden made a giant catch late in the game, and then Missouri ties it up. And the thing that's going to be remembered about this game, maybe the most chaotic ending I've ever seen to an OU game, Jackson Arnold gets stripped, and Missouri, a scoop and score from Zion Young to pull not just the game away from Oklahoma, but the bowl streak away from Oklahoma. 25 years of making a bowl game, that is going to come to an end because Oklahoma plays Alabama and LSU is their next two games. They're not winning either of those. They will go 5-7. And if you're Oklahoma, I mean, 4 turnovers in this game, a muffed punt, Arnold fumbling several times. I mean, Missouri had 34 minutes time of possession. This is an Oklahoma offense that is still terrible. It did not get better by adding Deion Burks back or Jalil Farouk. And the thing that stands out to me the most, Tyler, Luke Elzinga, who's the punter for Oklahoma, had as many passing yards as Jackson Arnold did in the first half. They both had 43. Arnold had 31 passing yards in the second half. Taylor Tatum, who threw a pass to Arnold, was 18 yards. For a touchdown. It was the best passing play of the day because it was the only one that resulted in a touchdown, if you think about it. It was the most productive, at least. And just Oklahoma, so many mental mistakes. And, I'll put it here on video finally, even. We talked about, give Brent a little bit more time. You fired Seth Luttrell. I'm finally out on Brent Venables. You can't lose a game like this with just so many mistakes that it feels like you either refuse to correct or just keep on happening. And it's little things too, like a fake punt that goes for 43 yards, and then you get a delay game because you were too busy celebrating. Like, that should never happen. Having to call timeout to start the fourth quarter because you didn't have the correct personnel on the field. That should not be happening. Missouri played great. Drew Pine, not a good quarterback, played well in this one. Had some QB run game that worked for him. All credit to Missouri. They pulled out the stops when they had to get them. Theo Weiss had a big day, 4 catches, 70 yards, 2 touchdowns. But my goodness, you said it earlier with Jackson Arnold. You want him to be better, but when you have a QBR of 26, when you have mistake after mistake, 3 fumbles, 2 of them lost. Oklahoma had 6 fumbles in this game. They are the worst team in the FBS when it comes to fumbling the ball. They've had 23 fumbles total this season. And that's just inexcusable. Peyton Bowen muffed a punt. Deion Burks had a fumble that set up Missouri taking the 16-9 lead. This was just another all-around pitiful, just absolutely horrendous, worst thing you could have imagined. And Tyler, I sat through the entire 49-0 Texas loss 2 years ago. I was there in person to watch this team lose to Texas 34-3 this year. We've seen a lot of bad Oklahoma games in these past 3 years especially, but this is the one that I finally looked at where it's just things have to be changed. There's no excuses. There's no, oh, well, this is happening, or hindsight you can look at least to me now. Brent has to be gone because I don't think he's the guy to fix this.
Well, while I'm not sold on the he has to be gone, but and that's mainly because his buyout's huge, right? Like, it's not happening this year, I think, no matter what, in terms of him getting fired. But heads better be rolling the off season. I think you're gonna have to evaluate everything in terms of your staff. Um, Brett's gonna have to really do some soul searching himself and say, okay, what can be done? How can you correct that ship. Obviously, the injuries have been bad. We know that they've been devastating at times. But when you do get back, Jalil Farouk and Deion Burks, you expect, okay, there should be a little bit better flow offensively. There was none of that. The best thing we had was our running game,
Yeah.
and that's something that had been a struggle all season long. But credit to Taylor Tatum, to Xavier Robinson for getting in there and doing a good job.
Yeah, Xavier Robinson out of nowhere just showing up and saving the day for a while in the fourth quarter.
Yeah. And, your average, at the end of the day, you only average 3.4 yards a carry. Part of that was you had some QB draws, with Arnold that didn't really do a lot. And you had some weird plays like the power sharp jet sweep. Like, what are we doing there?
Amazing play call. Definitely was not made by a 5-year-old on Madden.
No, but the thing is, Jackson Arnold should not be getting the same amount of carries that both Xavier Robinson and Taylor Tatum got together.
Absolutely.
Like that's the annoying part. Like Joe John Finley, for his credit, there were some good things they did, but there's also some head scratching things where you're clearly doing some good things in the run game. Why don't you stick with some more traditional runs there? I felt like at times he just tried to get a little too cute, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know, trying to get a little too inventive. And it just, but it speaks to the bigger problems with this team. They're just not a good football team.
Exactly. And, and credit to Missouri. I don't want to turn this into,
Missouri did their jobs.
Yeah, Missouri did what you're supposed to. When you play a bad football team and they make mistakes, you take advantage of it. When OU turned the ball over, Missouri got points off of it. They, Drew Pine, he played well. I don't think Missouri fans expected Drew Pine to play well. I know OU didn't, but he did. He had 3 touchdown passes in this game. He played as well as he's capable of. Missouri's running game was okay. Jamal Roberts, 4.2 yards a carry. He played all right. And that's really all Mizzou needed to do at certain points in this game because OU's offense is so bad, it wears the defense down, and then the secondary gets tired, and then they get exposed, and that allows Weiss and Burden to really get going later on in the game and make some impressive catches. Just an all-around horrible day for Oklahoma. 2 minutes left in the game, you think, man, Sooner Magic has struck again. We've got this in the bag. But then, as one Missouri fan I saw put it best, I can't believe Oklahoma out-Missouri'd Missouri. That's what happened in this game. This is going to be a fun rivalry to see the developments as it goes on in the future. It definitely felt like a rivalry game. So at least from the Missouri side, they were amped up to play in this one. There was some chippiness there between both sides. But at the end of the day, it was an incredibly entertaining game. I'm just sad that my team was a part of it because I did not want it to be that type of game in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, for everybody that's not an OU fan, this game was highly entertaining, a lot of fun.
Yeah, 34 points in the fourth quarter. Like, my goodness. It went from definite Missouri victory to definite OU victory to maybe overtime to oh dang Missouri won. It was the ultimate mood swing of a game for the final 8 minutes, but just a fun game. Just unfortunate we've got to sit here and talk about it from our perspective at least, but still credit to Missouri. And this is big for them because they're still in that playoff race right now. You had to find a way to win this game. You try to get Brady Cook back as soon as possible because you're going to need him against South Carolina when they play him.
Oh, absolutely. And like I said, big for Missouri to stay kind of in the picture when it comes to that playoff race. So, and Drinkwitz kind of referred to it after the game. You can tell he was feeling good that they found a way to get it done through all the adversity.
Absolutely. But folks, that will do it for this episode of the Guys Who Stare at Stats. As always, feel free to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell to be notified when new episodes come out. But until next time, leave a comment down below. Tell us who your winner for next week, what you agree with, what you disagree with this week. And then also, something we're trying to see here, give us your nominations for Champions of Life of the Week, for Fraud Alert, for all those fun things. We're trying to get to that 100 subscriber mark as well. Try to get that by, hopefully the end of the year or maybe the end of the college football season. Your definition of that, no matter what, whether that be regular season, postseason, any of that fun stuff. It only takes a few minutes out of your day to do that. It doesn't seem like a lot, but it does mean a lot to us.
and just make your voice heard. You know, we want
Exactly.
this to grow to be something where it's community involvement, right? As far as the college football community. So yeah, absolutely. Put your thoughts down in there, and we can address them on the show. That's the most fun. You know, we could give you our takes, but let's see what you got. We want to be able to kind of go with that. That adds a lot to it.
Absolutely. But folks, until next time, have a good one, everybody.